Summer of 88 Voyager's era. Frederick's foot sank beneath him. Panic shot through his chest for only a moment before giving way to pure regret. He tilted his head down and let out a long sigh. His boot, once polished and sturdy, was now submerged in a heap of dung. A scratchy chuckle drifted from behind him. Frederick clenched his jaw and did his best to ignore it, stepping aside as the rest of the group passed him in the narrow street. Muttering curses from beneath his mask, he wiped his boot against jagged stone, though it did little to help. He imagined the stench he'd be enduring if not for the thick leather and the metal beak that covered his face. By the time he caught up, Soinzu had fallen back slightly, letting him slip into place ahead. Unlike Frederick, Soinzu was treading carefully, his every step deliberate. From behind the dark lens of his mask, his gaze flicked to the shadows around them. The air was thick, not just with filth, but something far worse. The unseen eyes lurking beyond the green smog, the rattling coughs and sharp sniffles of unseen onlookers echoed through the alleyways. Soinzu's armour, usually a gleaming display of diamond inlays and polished steel, had taken on the murky hues of Rathatan's filth-ridden air. He gripped his sword's hilt beneath his robes, resisting the urge to draw. "How much longer?" came a muffled voice of Aether from near the front. Even through his mask, irritation was evident.
"Worry not, 'tis merely moments off,"
their guide rasped, his words whistling between yellowed teeth. Aether recoiled slightly as Beardicus's breath disturbed the damp, matted hairs that draped over his maw. A few crumbs of a past meal clung there, dislodging as he spoke. One stray piece landed in Aether's robe. He stiffened, exhaling sharply through his nose as he scraped it away, with gloved fingers watching it tumble into the filth below. He longed for home. He longed for air that did not feel thick with disease. But now was not the time for weakness. Straightening his posture, he readjusted the beak of his mask and pressed forward. Soinzu, ever watchful, caught a flicker of a movement above. Silhouettes, thin, hunched, peered through the smog from high above, their beady eyes glowing in the dim light. His grip on his weapon tightened.
"Take nae notice o' him,"
Beardicus sneered without turning his head.
"'Tisn't often outsiders are here.
His grin widened.
I reckons they thinks I'm having you for supper."
Another scratchy chuckle. Soinzu did not laugh. They pressed on, winding through the filth-ridden streets, until Beardicus suddenly halted. The rat folk slithered towards a door, pristine compared to its surroundings, yet out of place in its opulence. Its golden inlays and intricate carvings betrayed its origins. Crusadon. Stolen, Frederick thought. Beardicus's knotted arm lifted, hidden beneath layers of greasy fur, and he pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the frame. From within, the unmistakable sound of movement, scraping, scurrying, claws against the wood. Then a voice, raspy with age.
"Who is it?" "'Tis me, Beardicus. I've got visitors." "What kind of visitors?" "The diplomatical kind."
Beardicus cast the group a sideways glance. His beady eyes filled with distaste. A groan screamed through the wood.
"Oh, that's the worst kind."
A pause.
"Are they the airless kind too?" "Aye, they them GONFist type of airless."
Silence. Then without warning the door swung open with a creak. A tuft of tangled hair poked through the gap, shifting as two glowing green eyes peered at them.
"It's them plague doctors."
The voice carried an eerie delight. The old rat-folk woman chuckled, her amusement unsettling. Her gaze raked over them. Black robes, metal beaks, gloved hands, unreadable expressions.
"They's gonna love this," she muttered. "Bring him in then, Beardicus."
Beardicus licked his lips as he stepped past him. His eyes lingered on Soinzu's gleaming armour with particular interest, fingers twitching. Frederick ignored the sound of Beardicus's snuffling breath and focused on his surroundings. The hall was dim, barely illuminated by scattered oil lamps. Shadows clung to every corner, shifting as figures moved beyond sight. At the centre of the room sat a cluster of chairs, shoddily arranged, mismatched, and rickety.
"Choose his waits there,"
Beardicus ordered, motioning towards the chairs before slinking away into the gloom. The negotiators shared glances before obeying. The air inside was somehow worse. The GONFists took their seats, the chairs groaning under them as the dust and grime shifted from years of neglect. Aether sat rigid, hands folded in his lap, but his mind drifted elsewhere. He had spent years studying disease, poring over ancient texts and theories, travelling across Abexilas to combat the abyssal plague before it spread. He had thought himself prepared for anything, but the rats of Rathaton had tested him in ways no sickness ever could. He'd come here with a purpose. The plague that festered through Abexilas was unlike any he had encountered before, not just a sickness of the body, but of the mind, the soul. It was brought by the followers of Wyrma, the abyssal horror whose cultists sought to unravel the world itself. Aether had worked tirelessly to contain the outbreak, to push back against the creeping rot that threatened to consume everything. Unlike the rest of Abexilas, the rats thrived in filth. To them, the plague was not a disaster, but a gift. They let sickness run rampant, spreading it through their streets as if it were a holy blessing. When Aether had given them his ultimatum, control the disease or face military action, he had expected resistance. He had not expected them to prepare for war. And now, because of the clergy's decree, he was here, humbling himself before them, forced to mend the ties he had severed. He clenched his hands together, forcing frustration down. This was necessary. Even if every fibre of his being told him these creatures were beyond reason, he had to try. Aether exhaled slowly, focusing on the present. The room was dim, the air thick with mildew, and a sour tang of rot. Oil lamps flickered, their light barely cutting through the haze. Frederick shifted beside him, fidgeting with his mask. Soinzu sat still, one hand resting in the hilt of his sword, his gaze sharp beneath his hood. The silence was unnatural. Beyond the flickering lamplight, Aether could feel them. Eyes, dozens of them, glinting in the darkness. Shadows shifting in the rafters. The rats were watching. "They're staring at us," Frederick muttered. Soinzu didn't move. "Let them look." A heavy creak sounded from the hall. Beardicus emerged from the gloom, his tangled fur slicked back, as though he's made an attempt to make himself presentable. He grinned, his jagged teeth yellowed and uneven.
"Day's ready for you now,"
he rasped. Aether rose first, slow and deliberate. The others followed suit, Soinzu's armour clinking as he moved. Beardicus turned, leading them deeper into the decrepit building. The passage narrowed, the walls pressing close, the damp wood creaking under unseen movement. The whispers continued, slithering through cracks and shadows. At last, Beardicus stopped before a sagging door. He knocked lazily, then turned to the GONFists, amusement glinting in his beady eyes.
"Try not to insult them too quick, like,"
he sneered.
"They's got a nasty way of showing displeasure."
Then, with a shove, the door opened. The room beyond had once been grand, a hall fit for noble debate, now reduced to a den of filth and decay. Chipped chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their candles burned to blackened stubs. A long, warped table stretched across the chamber. It surfaced a battlefield of gnawed wood, spilled wax, and old stains of unknown origin. Around it sat a gathering of rats, each draped in patchwork cloaks and mismatched fabric, their beady eyes glinting through the dim haze of the greenish smog. At the head of the table loomed a high-backed chair, cobbled together from scavenged wood and rusted iron, lathered in tattered cloth and old banners. Seated within it was their host, a massive rat, larger than Aether had seen before, his matted fur draped over his hunched form like a mangy pelt, his whiskers twitching as he took in his guests. Around him, other rats muttered amongst themselves, their voices a chorus of scratching tones, half laughter and hushed whispers.
"Well, well,"
the large rat drawled, his voice rough, as though rust scraping stone.
"The airless ones come to grovel."
Scattered snickers rattled through the chamber as sharp claws tapped against the table's surface. Aether inhaled deeply, pushing his frustration down. This was not going to be easy. Rudentis leaned forward in his throne of scraps, his beady green eyes narrowing with interest. The other rats around the table fell into a hushed silence, their clawed fingers drumming against the warped wood in anticipation. Aether took a measured step forward, careful not to show hesitation. The stench of rot and damp fur pressed against him. Even through the protective filters of his mask, he could feel the weight of every rat's gaze, watching, waiting. "I seek an audience with your king," Aether declared, his voice steady. "We must speak of peace." For a moment there was silence, then a ripple of chittering laughter spread through the Parliament Hall, rising into a cacophony of wheezing cackles and sharp-toothed grins. Rudentis barked out a particularly harsh laugh, slamming his clawed fist against the table.
The king?
He sneered, shaking his head.
Oh, you poor hairless git. You truly don't know where you be standing, do you?
Aether stiffened. He'd prepared for hostility, but not ridicule. "I was told of a rat king," he pressed, glancing around the table. "Who speaks for the rats of Rathaton?" Rudentis grinned wide, his yellowed fangs glistening.
"Oh, we's got a rat king, all right,"
he purred.
"But you won't be speaking to him. None of us will."
Aether felt a flicker of unease. "Why?" Rudentis spread his arms wide, as if welcoming him to some grand revelation.
"'Cause the rat king ain't a rat like me,"
he rasped.
"The rat king be a god."
Aether's breath caught just for a moment. A god. He'd expected a ruler, some warlord or chieftain he could reason with, but instead they worshipped something beyond the material, a force of filth and plague, a being these creatures venerated above all else. He had come here seeking diplomacy. Instead, he had stepped into the den of zealots. Rudentis' grin only widened as he watched the realization dawn.
"You wanted to bargain with a king?"
he mused, his voice thick with amusement.
"But tell me, Plague Doctor, what deal can you strike with a god?"
Aether stood firm, his heart pounding with the weight of Rudentis' gaze. The oppressive stench of the room, the smell of damp fur, old food and decay clung to him as he faced the rat overlord. "I know your people are immune to the effects of the Abyssal Plague, Rudentis," Aether said, his voice level but heavy with authority. "But you must understand, this isn't just about pestilence. The Wyrmatic Cult isn't a mere nuisance. They are a threat to everything, to this entire world, and they'll stop at nothing to tear it down. Their god, Wyrma, is an eldritch abomination. If left unchecked, it will continue to consume everything, including your empire, no matter how invulnerable you think you are." Rudentis stared at Aether, his sharp green eyes glinting with disdain.
"You think we care about some worm Plague Doctor? We thrive off of chaos and rot, not in your orders and missions. What's your point?"
Aether pushed back, the frustration that was beginning to rise in his chest. "My point is, Rudentis, is that this cult isn't just spreading a plague. They seek to annihilate all of existence. Their god, Wyrma, seeks to obliterate the world of Abexilas. Nothing is safe from its reach. Not your empire, not your filth, not even you. If we don't stop them, everything you hold dear will be consumed in the flames of their madness." Rudentis was quiet for a moment, the rat's whiskers twitching as he processed Aether's words. His council, the other rats who filled the room, looked on with a mix of interest and disbelief. Finally, Rudentis broke the silence, his deep voice low but piercing.
"You expect us to fight for your cause?"
Rudentis sneered.
"We ain't interested in saving your world. We don't fight for anyone but ourselves."
Aether felt his pulse quicken. This is where he needed to play his cards carefully. He could see a glimmer of excitement in the eyes of the gathered rats, their restlessness barely contained. They longed for conflict, for battle, for bloodshed. They thrived in it, and Aether knew he could use this to his advantage. "I understand that you long for battle," Aether said, forcing his voice to remain steady. You live in chaos and rot, and you thrive in conflict. I'm not asking you to fight for my cause, I'm asking you to fight for your survival, for your people. The Wyrmatic Cult does not care for your way of life, and they will burn everything to the ground if we do not stop them. The rats murmured amongst themselves, their beady eyes flashing with interest. Aether could see a shift in their demeanour. The excitement for battle was growing in their ranks, a hunger that could not be denied. But Rudentis was still unconvinced. Rudentis, seated upon his mismatched throne, chuckled darkly.
Survival, eh? We ain't afraid of death, Plague Doctor. But you think we'd fight for a year world? What's in it for us?
His grin widened, revealing a row of yellow teeth. Aether's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of his words. He was walking a fine line. What's in it for you? Everything. The Wyrmatic Cult isn't just spreading the plague, it's trying to destroy everything, even your empire, Rudentis. No matter how deep your roots run, you'll fall just like the rest of us if we don't act. You long for war, for chaos. The cults, well, they'll give you plenty of that. But you have to act first. You cannot wait for them to come to you. But we can strike them. Together. Before they destroy everything you've built. I'm offering you a war. Not with us, but them. The murmurs of excitement rippled through the rats, their restless energy growing. They were warriors, bloodthirsty and eager for battle. But Rudentis seemed to ponder, his whiskers twitching as his gaze flickered to the rats around him.
Aye, war sounds good,
Rudentis said, his grin never fading.
But we ain't gonna fight for nothing. There's gotta be something in it for us. I was quite excited to spill your blood.
Aether's presence wore thin, but he maintained his composure. You'll be part of the greatest battle this world has ever seen. Rudentis, you'll fight alongside us, but more importantly, you'll fight for your own survival. If you truly want to protect your empire, this is the battle you need to win. Rudentis let out a slow chuckle. Looking around at his council of rats, they were visibly growing more eager, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. The room buzzed with an electric hum of excitement. Rudentis leaned forward, his expression turning dark and serious.
Aye, we'll fight for your cause. But there's one condition, Plague Doctor,
Rudentis said, his voice thick with menace. Aether felt his stomach tighten, sensing the shift in conversation. A condition, Aether asked cautiously. Rudentis nodded, his sharp eyes locking onto Aether's with a glint of something dangerous.
Aye, if we're to fight for your survival, ye gotta give us some. The Rat King, the one who watches over all the Arratis. He must be the one to devour the god of the Wyrmatic Cult, Wyrma.
Aether's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend the gravity of the demand. The Rat King, the deity the rats worshipped, was their supreme being, a creature Aether knew nothing of. And to claim that the Rat King must devour an eldritch being like Wyrma was wild, possible demand. He feared that if the Rat King was real in some way, would consuming Wyrma make it stronger? But the excitement in the room was palpable. The rats didn't care for nuance or diplomacy. They were bloodthirsty creatures, driven by instinct and the promise of war. Aether clenched his fist beneath his robes, his breath catching in his throat. This is not what he'd hoped for. You want me to agree to have your Rat King consume Wyrma? Aether asked, his voice tight. That's madness. Rudentis' grin stretched even wider, a gleam of pride within his eyes.
It ain't madness, Doctor. It's the only way. If you're gonna fight with us, you're gonna have to let the Rat King claim victory over Wyrma.
The rats behind him cheered, their voices rising in a chorus of eager howls. The promise of battle, of bloodshed, of their god-devouring and eldritch being was everything they've wanted. The excitement was overwhelming, and Aether could see the passion within their eyes. He glanced at Soinzu, who met his gaze with unreadable expression. Then Frederick, his face hidden behind his mask, shifted uncomfortably. Both men had their reservations, but there was nothing to do but face the harsh reality of their situation. If they refused, the rats would remain their enemies, and worse, they would be left to fight alone against the Wyrmatic Cult. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing as he considered the implications. Could he really allow the Rat King to consume Wyrma? But the reality was undeniable. The rats were offering something he needed, something that could turn the tide of battle against the cult. And they seemed unwilling to negotiate further. With a heavy sigh, Aether lowered his gaze, the weight of the decision settling over like a heavy fog. "Very well," he said, his voice strained but resolute. "I'll agree to your terms, but know this: the destruction of Wyrma, the consuming of its power, must be done with great care. If your Rat King fails, if the power provides too much for him to handle, there will be consequences." Redentist leaned back in his throne, a satisfied chuckle escaping his lips.
Aye, you got yourself a deal, Plague Doctor. We'll fight with you. We'll fight for your survival. But it'll be the Rat King that devours Wyrma. Now, let's see who gets to claim victory first.
Aether took a deep breath, the weight of the bargain settling over him. He had just agreed to the unimaginable. The alliance had been forged, and now the real battle was to begin.